Ladies, gentlemen, welcome back to yet another cold moonlit night. It's my pleasure, once again, to be greeting you from the comfort of my studio here in, well, parts unknown. But wherever we are in this world, this life, one thing's for sure. It's a brand new night, with new tales to tell, and, might I say, what a fitting night it is. Another letter in for you tonight, my friends, one that's especially near and dear to my own heart, as all our listeners are, of course. Jakob Akers, age 17. Always a pleasure to see the younger generations taking interest in our show. Well, Jacob, I can only hope to do your letter justice, especially after such a lengthy hiatus. You know the drill, folks. Keep those ears open and don't go touching that dial. I don't think I've ever thought of myself as much from the start, I'll be honest. Not that I'm not self-aware, I really don't believe I'm entirely all that bad, but maybe just not right. Maybe I'm just a teenager and don't know any better. That seems to be what my dad thinks. Anyway, don't get me wrong, he's a good father. Better to be with him than Mom. I just don't think he understands, really. And I know that's cliche for me to say, but not like that matters now. I go to West Point High. It's nice, for what it is. I don't have a lot of friends, but I like the ones I do have. We spend a lot of time doing stupid shit we probably shouldn't. Not much else to do around here anyhow. Just last week, Jesse nearly got suspended for blasting one of his old songs through the intercom. Need to appreciate the classics, I think he said. Jesse was funny. He always was. Without him, I don't know how we'd all make it through our time there. But he wasn't ever not funny, either. As weird as I know that is to say. We all kept to our roles, I guess. But they were my only friends. And I was always the weird one. They liked me, sure, maybe if not just tolerated me. But I didn't fit. I didn't have a niche. I wasn't funny like Jesse was. I didn't do sports like Max. I wasn't even a nerd like Jamie. Just some skinny, weird kid. Nobody ever really paid me any mind, or cared to really know what I was about. Didn't even get bullied much, apart from the jokes I would only occasionally overhear about me being the one most likely to show up with a gun one day, or end up having some weird animal torture fetish. I hate that part about us. That we have to fit a cast to be normal. Have to be some predetermined person, because if you're not, you're obviously a psychopath. But I wasn't. Let the record show I never killed any animals in the woods for a laugh, never dreamed about doing any of the terrible things to my classmates they said, and never obsessed over anything in my life. I guess that was my problem, really. Well, that's not entirely true. I wasn't obsessed, but there was this one girl, Sarah. We never really talked much, but once or twice when we were in class. She was always so nice to me, for no reason. She always asked me about me. Didn't even care when I got carried away talking about what I wanted to talk about for a change. I wasn't used to it, but it felt good. So good. She was pretty, too. Black hair, brown eyes, always wore dark red lipstick, and way out of my league. So Jesse and Max would always tease me whenever they caught me looking in her vague direction, of course. I hated that too, but I played along. I never actually expected to have a chance with her, not really, but maybe just get close enough for me to just enjoy being around her. But lucky, or unlucky, for me, I actually did get that chance with her. I still remember it perfectly, too. It was Thursday, lunchroom, just before break was over and we all had to get back to class. She actually came up to me. I remember I almost literally choked in front of her after having just shoveled a handful of chips into my face like the idiot I was. She smiled. Didn't say much beyond just hi. But even that made my heart race. I wasn't able to say anything before she handed me a scrap of paper with her number on it. My friends couldn't believe it any more than I could. I just held it when she walked away giggling to herself. Jesse said something funny again, but I couldn't hear him over my own heartbeat. You know, I meant it before, when I said I thought something was just off with me. I had never felt anything like that before in my life. It was terrifying, exciting, and it lasted all of about a class period. Well, Jesse and Max were all fucking around in the halls. Jamie stopped me from leaving class. Jamie was nice. A bit of a geek. Obsessive to a fault, but nice. Which is why he burst my bubble before I got too far ahead of myself. I wasn't the only one Sarah gave her number to. I wasn't even the only one in our friend group she gave her number to. Jamie had been through something similar before. Long before me, even. It was a dare. Shocking. I know. Apparently I had been getting too quiet in class, started being too distant, started becoming more of a freak to everyone. Even Sarah. Too perfect a target to pass up, too pathetic for consideration beyond disgust. I don't remember what I said to Jamie, but I know it wasn't kind. And I know he didn't deserve it. At first, the thought was offensive, that I would be the same as him. Only now can I see that's just a cruel a thought as Sarah thought of me. I know this probably isn't very important for what happens next, but it's important for me to know that you know Jamie was a good guy. He did nothing wrong to anyone, least of all me. I got angry. Maybe a little more than I should have. I just left, really. Walked right out of the building. We were going to our next class, so nobody really stopped me. Not like I ever drew much attention to myself anyway. A while back, Jesse showed me where he and some of his other friends went to go get high between periods. A nearly ancient wooden bench out in the middle of the woods. A picnic table, but covered in moss and leaves. Thankfully, it was just me, though. At that point, I didn't even know what I was feeling. I just laid on top of that old table looking up to the gray sky. In that moment, that quiet, all my anger just imploded on me. Admittedly, I had never had a very high opinion of myself, but all at once it all just felt justified. Maybe I deserve this. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I'm just broken. Cruel thoughts, sure. But true. I just didn't make the cut, I suppose. Wasn't fit to be seen, to be loved. Wasn't even really fit to be human. And just like that, I felt something pittering against my hand. I leaned upwards from my laying position and almost immediately jumped. So did my heart. I hit my head on the bench as I fell off, trying to get away. A spider. A widow, I think. It wasn't very big, but I, like everyone else, am petrified of spiders. I stood up off the ground, now holding my bruised eye as I watched the pitch-black arachnid stand completely still, reactionary to my violent reaction to it. I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to squash it there and then for making me hit my own stupid face against the bench. And I almost did squash it. Taking my shoe off to smash the thing into the table, I stopped. Maybe it was the heartache, maybe it was the developing head injury, but I stopped. Part of me. Not a very big part, but still, part of me felt sympathetic. Nobody ever notices these things either, unless it's a violent, disgusted reaction. Maybe that's all I was now. A thing to be squashed. Maybe that's what I deserve, for being the way I was. But I certainly wasn't about to pass that judgment on to someone, something else. I put my shoe back on and watched as it crawled into the underbrush. The next day wasn't much different from any other. Jamie was more quiet than normal, and even though I said I was sorry to him about 100 times, I still couldn't help but feel terrible. We were some of his only friends, and he was just trying to help. I started to blame Sarah for my reaction to him. Started to blame her for how I felt about myself, which I think helped me come to terms with everything. Even helped me justify growing more distant from my friends. There was a whole thing about how I got the black eye. I think they had thought I was being abused or something. That, and I was still sulking most of the time. Of course, they all took that as me needing time, space. Just when I felt like I needed the opposite. But I couldn't express that seriously in any way. It wasn't long before I saw Sarah again. A couple days later, I saw her giggling and waving to me from across the cafeteria, her friends by her side. Needless to say, I didn't wave back. But it quickly went beyond just passing waves and glances. She'd start saying hi to me every day. Started calling me by my name. I didn't even know she knew my name. It was about 2 weeks after she had given me her number. But she came up to me. In the hallway, end of the day. Everyone in a hurry to get home, and she walked in the opposite direction of the exit for me. I think she even left her friends behind. I remember she looked different than before. She looked more concerned, more empathetic. As weird as it is for me to say, she looked more human, more kind. In a soft voice, she asked me what was wrong, why I kept ignoring her, and in my stuttering awkwardness, I tried to accuse her, tried to point out her own cruelty done to me, the pain she inflicted. My words actually seemed to cut fairly deep. She seemed actually hurt, as if an insect like me could say anything to hurt something like her. I almost immediately retracted, tried to tell her it didn't matter, and that it was fine. Tried even to walk away from the awkward situation, but Before I could, her fingers pittering and rapping against my arm to stop me, she looked me dead in the eye. She admitted it was a dare, flatly. Stated I was some mark for her, but that's also not all I was anymore. She also said she was interested in me now, that she was curious. But at that point I didn't believe her, and she could clearly tell by my expression. Of course I feigned belief, acceptance, but she saw right through it. And then, almost to prove everything I knew was wrong, in the middle of the hallway, without a care, she pressed her lips to mine. I didn't even have time to close my eyes before she just pulled away with a soft smile. She apologized, and then just walked away. I didn't know what to think. My heart fluttered out again. All of a sudden, I was validated, wanted. I just stood there like an idiot for what felt like an hour before my feet started to do the thinking for me. I remember thinking how strange it was, how off guard I was, and weirdly how cold she felt. Even when we kissed, her lips were cold, but it all felt so warm, too. Every touch was like electricity to me. Cold as she was, I was practically sweating anyway, so I didn't mind. The next day was similar. Awkward, but we actually talked for a bit. She sat at my table, or rather we found a table together, away from her friends and away from mine. And we just talked. For those 30 minutes I felt like she was the only person in the world that mattered. After that, she found me in the hallway, and we walked out together. Found a place in the woods to just sit, talk, kiss, be together. I felt like a real person for the first time in my entire life, and it was all thanks to her, to Sarah. Those next couple of days we spent as much time together as we could manage. She even told me she didn't live far from me and that I should come and visit sometime. Of course, I agreed to come by over the weekend. The more time I spent with Sarah, the less I wanted to spend with anyone else. Jesse, James, Max, all seemed like distant memories now, even though it was really only a couple of days. I don't think Max and Jesse even noticed I was gone. Jamie tried to bring me back, though. Even started to offer to just hang out with me, not Jess or Max. Maybe he thought they were the reason I was distancing myself from them, but honestly, the truth was I just felt better with Sarah. Felt more like myself. I still shouldn't have pushed him away. Not like that. But what could I have said to him? How could have I explained better that for once I wasn't an outcast, a reject from the world, but had a world of my own? I tell myself now that he'd understand, that in my shoes he'd do the same as I. But I can't really bring myself to believe that. Not entirely. Friday came faster than it ever had before, with me spending most of my days either thinking of or spending every moment with Sarah. Every moment seemed to feel like a small eternity. I showed her the bench, that small secluded spot where nobody went anymore. A place for us to be alone. I actually worked up enough nerve to finally ask her why. Why the sudden interest? Why I wasn't just another prank, why she abandoned her friends for me and now I did for her. Why she'd cast herself down the social ladder for someone like me, by all means an insect. A tiny, insignificant thing in comparison to her. She kind of stiffened up at that, but smiled, warm and gentle as ever. skin paler than the clouded sky. She admitted at first I wasn't much of an interest, that she didn't really care for me. Noticed my obvious gawking. Apparently I had been obvious. But one day, a couple of weeks ago, her view just changed. She said she noticed how hollow her life was, how empty her connections with her friends were. Went as far as to call them wastes of time, which struck me as harsh at best. But she continued. She said she saw herself in me, someone too complicated for the rest of them to understand. Someone that, if ever were to show their true self, would be utterly rejected, like I was. It was then she gingerly grabbed my hand across the table. Her hands were freezing, so I almost instinctively grasped my hands around hers to warm her. I quickly forgot the cold when she looked into my eyes. Her words almost brought me to tears. I love you, Jacob. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've seen or done or believe. There is nothing, or will ever be anything, more powerful than those words. That expression of pure, utter dedication, acceptance beyond all. I didn't need to be human for her, I just needed to be me. The thought alone left me speechless. From that point on, if I wasn't already, I was hers. I love you too, Sarah. Saturday. Finally. Sarah apparently only lived a couple blocks from me, so I just decided to walk it. She wanted me to come by later, because apparently she didn't get much sleep the night before. To be honest, neither did I, really. I was far too excited, ecstatic, to see her again, spend the day with her, see what her family was like. My mind was buzzing. I really didn't think to tell Dad where I was going. Didn't really want to. He had a habit of being a bit too nosy. Last thing I wanted was anyone fucking this up. At some point in the day, though, Jamie called me. It was, I think, the last time I ever talked to him. If I had known at the time, if I had just... Jamie tried to tell me that he missed me. He tried to tell me he wanted his friend back. That the other two didn't matter. He only wanted me back. He told me he missed what we had before. He asked me if we could hang out today. I didn't know how to respond. Didn't know how to feel. Jamie, the others, everyone, didn't matter to me anymore. There was only Sarah, my one true love. I told him I wasn't feeling well. Told him that maybe we'd do something some other time. Told him I was sorry. I could tell he knew what that meant. I never heard him sound so defeated, so woefully and utterly alone. He said he was happy for me, though, that he understood. I don't think he did. But he was nice like that. Kind enough to play through whatever pain there was. I said my last goodbye to my one true friend. And then I left for Sarah's. As the bright orange sky fell to dark, I came to find myself before home. Sarah's, and soon to be mine. The building was moderately sized, 2 floors with white semi-worn walling and shingled roof, a front porch with various wooden furniture, rocking chairs, cushions, carpets, and the like, along with a single lamppost hanging off from the doorway like a beacon of purest white light. The windows were shut, even blocked rather completely with curtains. I stood outside, and for all my experience with her now, I was still a nervous wreck. Texting her I was at the door, or at least trying to. My phone was jittering and shaking almost as much as I was, the screen growing brighter, then darker, then brighter once more. It ignored almost everything I tried to put in it. I only barely managed to type out, "I'm here," and press send before the damn thing shut off entirely. Almost on cue, I began to hear a soft whistling from behind the house. The lantern illuminating their porch seemed to flicker, almost in tune with the soft, melodic whistle. I stepped away from the door, following the path leading to a small wooden gate. The gate seemed well worn and broken down, almost older than the house, probably. I called to the backyard, expecting a friend of Sarah's, or maybe her mother or father, but instead I heard her call back to me, beckoning me to come in. Blind as I was, nervous as I was, I complied. At this point, it began to grow dark. The last idle rays of now almost red sunlight piercing through trees and painting Sarah's backyard in a bright crimson plain. Much to my initial relief, it was indeed just her, sat there upon a familiar-looking, worn bench. I scoffed loudly in amusement at first, asking how it had gotten here before I approached and noticed the faint errance of stranding red mesh across her cheek. I stopped. My heart nearly did too as she turned to look at me, still with that kind and warm smile. Yet her face was changed, paler than before, and interlaced with what looked like webbing. Her eyes barely tracked me as she spoke, almost giving a vacant stare. She told me that this was the first place we met, the first place she truly saw me for who I was, the place where she knew she loved me. I, in my shock, began to approach, almost interrupting her as I frantically stuttered out my concern for her well-being. "Are you okay? What happened? Do we need to get you to a hospital?" All ignored. She just continued. With every passing word, the day grew longer into the night, the crimson red replaced by a similarly white lamppost her house had on her back porch, which only seemed to serve to make her look even paler than she already was. She seemed dismissive to my concern. "All that doesn't matter now," she spoke. Still so warm, so kind, so human. She looked at me with a smile, and as she did, I could almost see every muscle contract against her now flaking skin. My breath hitched in my throat, but eventually she stood. She walked her way over to me as I froze, now almost petrified at what I was seeing. Her eyes were now dilated to the point of pitch black, the webbing over her face making her look like some kind of cracked porcelain. But as she approached, she just held my cheek gingerly, softly. "I want you to see me now too, Jacob," she said. and as much as I was petrified, I couldn't help but feel my heart flutter even at her touch, even now. Before saying much, she drifted off into her house, sliding open the back porch door before stepping inside without me. I tried to ask her to wait, to stay, but she didn't listen. I'm a little ashamed to admit that I waited outside for another few minutes, before finally deciding on what I would do. Believe me, I thought of running, of sprinting down the street and screaming for help or calling for someone, anyone, but Sarah was mine, and I was hers. This was our story, and I'd see it through. Hesitantly, I walked through the precipice and into her house, unknowing of what awaited me on the other side, and half uncaring, so long as Sarah was still there. It was dark, maybe darker than it should have been, but then again all the curtains and windows were shut tight. I stepped into the house, calling out Sarah's name. Occasionally I'd hear footsteps, but they sounded like they were from all over. I'd turn a corner and reach my hand out to what I thought was a heavy footfall only a moment ago, just to find nothing but empty air. I was practically blind, and so afraid of what lurked in the dark, even if it was my love. I had to feel my way around the house, quite literally. My hands brushed against every surface, though as I drew deeper into the place, my hands soon grew sticky, along with my shoes. Webbing, cobwebs, everywhere. Across every surface, smattered through every inch of exposed wall or floor or furniture, accumulating like swaths of dust. I called out for Sarah again, this time more frantic than I ever had been before. And finally there was a reply. Apparently I was in some sort of living room. Their television screen suddenly roared to life with an air of static and noise, and pure white screen finally illuminating the room. Though I almost wish it hadn't. My heart stopped again as I turned to the couch and saw a body laying across the sofa, covered from head to toe in webbing. A man, older, sat desiccated, completely pale white, mummified skin, a limb barely clinging to his torso. Likely only formed together by more silky strands of thread. A hand shot up to my mouth as every thought I had suddenly stopped. Nothing but horror. Sheer and true filled my mind. Nothing but an ever-present dread. That of a fly. An insect. Who had so clearly and gleefully been led right into a nest. My mind barely had enough time to recoil in horror, as through the loud static I heard several loud cracks and snaps behind me, along with a heavy footfall to my left and to my right, painted like a long black shadow in front of the TV, was the silhouette of the one who led me here, the one who had given my life such purpose before, hung up now like a marionette. Suspended several inches from the ground, tears began to well up in my eyes, whether it was from the confusion or horror, I don't know. I saw two long, slender black limbs leading up from the pitch-black ceiling of the room down behind Sarah's back, pinned with tiny frayed hairs that occasionally jutted out across their length. I tried to look up to better see what it was that now had to be just above me, but as I did, I heard a loud snap come from Sarah. I watched as the limbs behind her shifted, moved, and let out soft noises from behind her back, squelching, moving, shifting. I felt my stomach turn as my own tears fell down and pittered like rainfall across the webbed carpet. Sarah's arm snapped and jolted out as her head unnaturally raised to look at me. Another loud, wet smush echoed in an otherwise quiet room as blood spluttered out from behind her back, painting the white TV screen and making the only source of light in the room a deep, dark crimson. In my horror, in my fear, I fell to my quaking knees, my stomach churning. My body was conflicted on whether I should sprint or vomit. Before I could do either, she finally spoke to me again. "Do you still love me, Jacob?" Her voice, unmistakable, undeniable, which only pierced my already fractured mind further. When it occurred to me it was the voice, it was no longer coming from Sarah, but instead echoing around the room, as if to come from above me. Somewhere in the pitch black I could not see, or did not dare to. As I sat there, prostrated before the corpse of my love, my friend, an innocent girl who didn't deserve this, my life flashed before me as I felt her presence grow closer. My own eyes grew distant and dark as I felt breath lighten, even if the tears did continue. I came to the thought, brief and fleeting as my life was soon to be, if only I had been different. If only I had been better. Had less self-pity, had more sense. Listened to Jamie. And only if onlys filled my mind to the point of bursting, a great distraction from the puppet corpse thing that now loomed over me. I looked up to it, and as I did, I heard several more loud footfalls within the room, watching 2 more long, spiny black limbs descend from the ceiling in front of the TV, almost acting to box me in, as the corpse of Sarah leaned closer. I felt a heated breath on the back of my neck, a salivating, hungry presence. And I, through miracle alone, found the strength, the willpower to stammer back awkwardly, but flurried and panicked. I heard more limbs crashing down all around me now, my heart racing, my time running out as I crawled, ran, sprinted desperately for escape before I found it. The front door flung open, slammed into the wall, leaving a hole in it as I sprinted out from the monstrous house, away from the corpse puppet, away from Sarah. I got all of about to the end of the porch before I fell, my leg twisting as I came careening into a bush along the pathway. I turned to look back, only to see Sarah. She stood in the doorway, illuminated by the porch lamp. I could now see her better. The damage done to her body, the sewn-together patches of red silken skin, the fractured, desiccated skin, her all but black eyes. I heard her speak to me again in the same voice, though this time her lips did not move. "I didn't mean to scare you, Jacob. I'm sorry." I made my way back to my feet as, by all means, she wasn't seeming to chase me. My ankle twisted, I figured I wouldn't be able to make it far. But as she spoke again, she cut through all thought, all fear, her voice as sweet and warm as it ever was. I proclaimed through sorrow and rage, and naught but sheer pain. I demanded to know what it, this thing, what it did to Sarah. I am Sarah, Jacob. I always have been. I began to weep, openly, utterly. This was my love. This was the one who brought me such joy, the one thing who made me whole. Sarah opened her arms to me slowly from the doorway, her head tilting down as I could just faintly see the long, slender black limbs that have snaked their way into her body to move and contort her around. I won't stop you if you want to leave, but I still love you. I wish you loved me too. What was there to do? What choice did I ever really have in the end? She was a monster, some predatory creature that surely was only ever after my body. Maybe so I could be its next puppet. Surely that's all she wanted me for. Surely I was no different from the rest. Surely it didn't matter. Regardless. I could have limped along my fractured ankle for as far down the road as it would have taken me. Called, screamed for help. Rest assured, I could have escaped. If I had tried to. But she knew as well as I, whether I was in that house or not, it didn't matter anymore. My life would be nothing without her. My life was nothing without her, before her. Even through the pain and horror and disgust, it was always her. Always. I limped my way back up those pale white wooden steps and back up to the doorway. She didn't lunge at me, didn't wrap her spined legs around me and tear at my flesh. She just smiled, warmly, softly, even on her long, desiccated face. I loved her, and she loved me. We embraced in that doorway. I could only hear several more loud footfalls behind her, tears welling in my eyes. Then all went black. Quite the letter, Mr. Akers. Quite the letter indeed. Once again, friends and listeners, this was a letter from Jakob Akers, recently apparently marked as missing person after some allegations and supposed evidence coming to light regarding an abusive relationship with his father. According to testimonies of several young adults close to Jakob and his own mother, Richard Akers was suspected of murdering his son and burying his body. For several months, these allegations only seemed to grow before his own untimely suicide. Well, Jakob, wherever you are, I hope you have come to find the love you so desired. I hope we all come to find love in the end. After all, what is life without it? I know personally I would not be the man I am today without the love and support from loyal listeners like you and Mr. Jakob Akers. That will conclude our show for the night, and with the conclusion of Mr. Akers' letter, I can only hope we take some solace in knowing that there's someone out there for all of us. Until next time.